From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, how are you today? It's good to be back for another exciting episode.
I'm doing great, Steve. And how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to have a one-on-one conversation. We enjoy our guests, but this is also a fun way for us to kind of talk through some topics as we would if we were just chatting in person. So I really enjoy that. What we had uh, lined up for today was to talk a little bit about the changing role of a programmer. For over the years, AV programmers have been really important. Then they have had a target on their back. Then we had talked about in past episodes programming versus configuration, and we've talked about just the fact that the programmer, while important, needs to really find their place. But if we look at the path, I think that uh, what a programmer does and where and what value they provide probably has a different meaning to different people. So I'll kind of start it off with what in your mind and what you feel is traditionally seen as a programmer's role. What do you think are some of the most critical things that a programmer is responsible for? And we always say we know that they have to write code. So beyond that,
Yeah. So, maybe this is not a popular opinion, but I would say probably the main thing programmer role is actually understanding end to end the whole system, which requires a lot of understanding and a lot of thinking and pulling strings because understanding the full system end to end, one allows us to program it the way it's supposed to work, but also allows us to troubleshoot when there is an issue and be like, okay, this is where the issue is and how do we address it. But if you don't really know the end to end things, if people are just saying, oh, I'm throwing this up and oh, this doing this, then you're lost.
I I couldn't agree more. I'm glad you said it that way too, because I think understanding systems is probably the most vital part of a programmer because they need to know a little bit about a lot of things and they need to know how everything needs to work together. I think I recently was talking and saying how a programmer doesn't even to be effective doesn't even need to have to write code if they can write down everything that a system should do and they understand how all of the pieces of equipment work together and how the user will interface with them. So to your point, but troubleshooting, hands down, number one skill that I think a programmer needs. You have to write good code, but if you can't troubleshoot, you're cooked.
Yep, 100%. And that's really understanding the end to end the whole system and seeing it not like you almost have to see the system twice because you have to see at the 30,000 foot and then you also have to see at the 1 inch, the very detailed. So you have to be able to zoom in and out as a programmer in the system to fully understand it. Where a system designer should only really need to look at 30,000 feet, how everything's connected and all that stuff. Where a programmer needs to see that, but also get down to the nitty gritty of the protocols, the timing, all that stuff.
I i um i think the key element there, because and I'm sure you're gonna laugh when I say this, is that the programmer has to be able to defend themselves, because what's the first thing that gets blamed when something doesn't work? It's programming.
Oh, yes.
So they need to be able to justify or try to um, defend the fact that it's not something that's they're doing or isn't something that they have created. And the programmer almost has to be a detective where they can say, okay, go look over here, these are the clues to be able to find the solution that you're looking for.
100%. And sometimes we don't always get all the right clues. So, or the full picture. So we have to take the clues and do do a puzzle. And I kind of chopped it just up because I just did it recently in a team training thing we just did last week or so. Because I don't know if you've done this, Steve. You ever done the Einstein riddle?
Yeah.
With the And so what the riddle is there's five houses. In each house is a different color. Each house has a different pet. Each house has a different cigarette brand. Each house has a different nationality person in there. And you get 15 clues. And you have to solve who owns the fish.
Wow. Okay.
And they claim that 98% of people can't figure it out. I don't think that is actually accurate, but I mean, so we actually did it as like a team training thing, and we went through that, and yes, we figured it out. But it also talks about your troubleshooting and kind of shows you how each person handles troubleshooting differently and how you went about to solve this riddle.
I'm going to look that up. That sounds
Yeah.
very interesting.
I was
Uh,
funny enough was I don't know exact time, but I believe it took myself 10 to 15 minutes to solve it. I went home that night and actually gave it to my family. I gave it to both my daughters and my wife. And it took them about 25 minutes to solve it.
well, and I think it goes to show how different people's brains work or what you're trained to do.
Yep. And we right before we went into that puzzle, we kind of did a evaluation of your how you go about troubleshooting things. Like was four columns with different terms, and you say, oh, this I use this when I'm troubleshooting, or like some is about feeling, some it's like logic, trust, or all that stuff, and you pick. I think it was we had to pick 12 from there, and then you tally up the number of from each column, and that column was your primary for troubleshooting. And there's like a logic, more feeling wise, more this way. It kind of shows you how you go about troubleshooting issues. And I, of course, felt I don't remember the title, but I found the second one was more the logic and processing of seeing the system from end to end type deal.
And that just goes to show that I think the programmers really think a certain way, and in order to be able to be successful doing what we're doing, it requires um, training and a mindset and potentially some inherent skills. And I think the reason I'm bringing that up is a lot of times programming is talked about in terms of a language. Can you do this? Can you do that? And I think in AV, it's easier to understand everything that is involved in programming and then learn a language. And what one of the things that we're starting to see now is that just understanding one platform or one language, it can be limiting in a career, because I think that there's more, the doors are open to more options, and credit to higher ed and other technology managers. They're being more demanding in terms of, I'm not going to just stick with the status quo. I'm going to look for the option that's best suited for me, which may mean that we need to learn something new. And I think a good programmer should be able to adapt to that. And I could go further with that, but what it is understanding those principles and then being able to say, okay, I know I have to get up to speed on something new, but if I know this, I should be able to know that.
Yes, I've actually had that conversation with a lot of my student workers is the understanding the basic, the fundamental, even in programs, for the sake of program for in general, you got your Python, you got your C Sharp, you got C++, Ruby, Java, all they all have their uniqueness, but they all kind of have the same kind of principle. So if you can understand how one functions, now the syntax and the lining and the styles might be different from language to language, but at least you can start working your way through. You understand how it works, the framework. So we got to do that in AV as well. We can't just be like, oh, this is what we're programming in. And I actually talked to, not programming wise, but talked about this on AV Live about there's a power struggle, as you mentioned, especially in higher ed. There used to be in the past would be manufacturing integrators be like, this is what you do, this is how it's done, and you know, us higher ed folks, and either didn't have the time or just the knowledge to be like, oh, no, that's not. So you dealt with it. And then now you got tech managers like myself and Brett and Joe and all these other people who are more educated, and they're like, wait, no, we don't have to go that route. So we're driving the conversation. We have the more of the power of between the two parties, and it's less of being dictated and being told what to do, but more of saying, no, this is what we need to do. This is the way we're doing it. And you see that manufacturers are responding to it in a positive way, and some, I would say, some integrators are, and some are not. And the ones who are not are going to struggle.
I couldn't agree more. And I think there needs to be an adaptation, and there needs to be more open-mindedness and honestly evolution, because that we're in the technology industry. We have to continue to change and grow and adapt. We're kind of taking the programmer's role a little bit further. One of the things that I think about often is we're no longer doing simple systems because those don't require programming per se. They may work out of the box, they may be configured. We're doing either very complex systems, or we're doing a large number of systems that, as you mentioned in a previous episode, require consistency and reliability and management. So programmer role now is becoming a little bit um, specialized. Let's say, you have your front end people, you have your back end people, maybe you have an architect that is going to lay out how a system should work. Perhaps more than one programmer works on a project because you can break up the different components. And I think that could be very valuable to you and other technology managers. You may have a programmer that can do the parts that they're comfortable with, but then you could hire a specialist that can do the parts that they may not be comfortable with, whether it's working with a new device, working with interfacing with the network or the database, or doing a very elaborate front end. So I think that there's opportunities there for programmers to grow if they start thinking bigger picture.
Oh, 100%. Because there's so many uniqueness we can get into with the programming. As you mentioned, you got your back end, you got your front end, you got your full stack. You got to have someone, even program wise, who understands networking or databases and all that stuff. So, yes, there's a lot of, you can become specialized in a certain area, especially with AV over IP. You can have a programmer who really understands the networking and can program how the AV over IP devices are going to act on the network. So it's definitely a lot of avenues there.
And as systems become more scalable, I think it's important that they get planned in advance. So the system may be a certain size or certain capability today, but in the future it may grow or evolve, and you need to build a foundation to be able to grow with, rather than saying this is going to change, now I have to start over. It's that's not acceptable anymore. It's you have to be able to have something that can evolve over time. The programming is not finite.
Yes, the program is never once and done. It's always evolving.
Um, I guess wrapping up this one, I think that it's important, and I hope that our audience sees that the life of a programmer, although may not be what it once was, I think it still has a lot of application and a lot of value in the industry. Um, if we could just mention maybe some way that programmer can demonstrate their value. Like, we've talked about this a little bit on episodes, but I think that being behind the scenes, we don't get enough of a chance to be able to see the value that a programmer brings to a project. What do you think would be a way that somebody could do that? And if they were maybe less prominent in their organization, or not somebody who had was very outward facing.
So it's it's hard for me to quantify it, but I kind of heard this on AV Week. Forget which episode it was. I think the host was Brian, and he said this, and this is, I think, can show a true value of a program. He said the way I took the conversation, and maybe I interpreted it wrong, was that he was at a meeting, and during the meeting, the person he's meeting with kept using the TV remote to wake up the computer because he kept going to sleep. And his response is like, I can prevent you from doing that. That's what us programmers can do. We can, that's how we show our value, is we see the user didn't even realize they were doing that.
Mhm.
And we can solve a pain point for them of they may not even realize it's a pain point. It's just something they deal with. And you can come in and say, hey, that 15 steps you just took, I can make it two. And then you're gonna be like, wait, what? They're gonna be like, oh, wait, well, I didn't realize I was wasting a minute every time on this process. Now you can get me down to 10 seconds. Great.
I That's a great example, and I happen to have listened to that same exact episode. So that's a really great example. I from my perspective, I would tell people a lot of times that when a system isn't working, a lot of it looks like it's the hardware, but many times it's poor programming. And that's where a programmer can show their value in, you don't have to replace what you have. You don't have to buy anything new. All you have to do is hire the right person to make everything work the way it's supposed to work. So to your point, you're addressing a pain point, but that could very quickly correlate to cost savings. And I think that's what programmers should be hanging their hat on, is the value that they provide to an organization, and how they've been able to um, quantify their efforts and their contributions. Probably a good place for us to stop this one. How can people get in touch with you and learn what you're up to, and any final takeaways?
Um, Google me, you'll find me. Anything with HEPMA, I'm there. Writer for the Higher Digital Magazine, IT and AV column. So on X as AV_James King. Again, you Google me, you'll find me.
And also, as we mentioned in the last episode, please check out James on the Commercial Integrator 40 Under 40. That's a big achievement, and congrats, James.
Thank you.
And for me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. You can reach my company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net. Also do another podcast for AV Nation called The State of Control, which with Rich Fergosa. Please check that out as well. And but we definitely like to hear from you and like to know what you like hearing. You can catch us here on YouTube, the video version, or the audio version on your favorite podcast player. But please like, share, leave a comment, and we want to know that our audience is out there and that we are addressing the topics and talking about things that you want to hear about. So please reach out to us and let us know that. And with that, this has been Ask the Programmer.